In the sweltering heat of Qatar's desert, I felt as if the warmth had become a part of me, wrapping around me like a second skin. Standing on the old wooden pier, I idly kicked my sandals against the time-worn boards, my eyes drawn to a procession of sleek, high-end cars cruising by. The drivers, mostly young men sporting sharp haircuts and designer shades, seemed to slow their vehicles just enough to cast long, assessing looks my way. "Nice view, huh?" The deep, unexpected voice made me start. I turned to see a tall man with sun-bleached hair and a confident smile, leaning casually against the railing nearby. He carried himself with a certain arrogance that I usually found off-putting, but tonight, it didn't irk me as much. "Yeah," I replied nonchalantly, my gaze returning to the horizon where the sun dipped low, painting the sky in vivid hues. "Sunsets are pretty common here, though, wouldn't you say?" He laughed, a warm, inviting sound. "Maybe common, but still pretty impressive." "And those cars," he added, gesturing toward a cherry-red Ferrari that had just stopped further down the pier, from which a glamorous woman was stepping out, "are definitely not common." "Nope," I agreed with a smirk. "Those are a rare sight." His eyes sparkled with amusement. "You don't seem too taken with all this glitz and glamour." Leaning back against the railing, I crossed my arms. "It wears off. It seems like everyone here measures their worth by their bank balance." Raising an eyebrow, he asked, "So, what measures yours?" His question caught me off guard. Growing up as the daughter of a billionaire who co-owned a massive American chocolate empire, I'd seen enough of the world to last a lifetime. That's why I chose to forge my path in Qatar, far from my father's shadow. "Well," I hesitated, unsure how much to disclose. "I value hard work and making your way in the world." He observed me intently for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. I'm Robert, by the way," he said, extending his hand. "Emma," I replied, shaking his hand. His touch sent a surprising jolt through me weeks later, as we lounged by the pool at his upscale hotel, sipping cocktails under the shimmering city lights. Robert revealed that his company was searching for someone with my qualifications. "We could use someone like you," he stated casually. "Your company?" I looked up sharply. "Yeah," he shrugged. "It's a major investment firm in the States. We're always looking for talented people." His gaze locked with mine. "So, what do you say? Interested in a change of scenery from the usual Qatar sunsets?" The proposal sent my heart racing. The idea of starting anew, particularly with Robert, was thrilling yet daunting. I hesitated, my inner doubts surfacing. "I don't know. It's a big step," I admitted. He leaned in, his voice low and persuasive. "I know, but it could be an incredible adventure for you." After a moment of mixed emotions, I decided to take the risk. However, maintaining my independence was crucial. I couldn't simply move in with Robert. Instead, I found a modest apartment in a typical neighborhood, far from the opulent lifestyle he was accustomed to. This way, I could explore this new chapter on my terms, keeping my carefully crafted identity intact. I decided not to tell my father about my move to the States just yet. He was always caught up in a whirlwind of international business trips, and I wasn't quite sure how he'd react to my recent adventures in Qatar. Not to mention my budding relationship with Robert. Only a few weeks after settling into my new role at Robert's company, I was already making strides. The job was demanding, but I thrived, feeling a sense of fulfillment that had eluded me in Qatar. One evening, after a particularly taxing day, all I wanted was to sink into my old, comfy couch. But as I walked in, I froze. There, in my modest living room, sat my father. He looked utterly out of place in a space that clearly screamed budget living. My jaw dropped in shock. "Dad." The word barely made it out as my voice cracked. With a slow, familiar smile, he replied, "Well, Mira, it seems a father can visit his daughter, even in her humble abode." "How did you find me?" I asked, my mind racing for explanations. He shrugged, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "Let's just say a father has his ways, especially when his daughter jets off to Qatar and then pops up working at a top investment firm across the ocean." I swallowed hard, realizing he knew everything. The world seemed to spin slightly off kilter. "I just needed a new start," I mumbled, avoiding his gaze. A chance to build something for myself on my terms. He nodded slowly, understandingly. I get that, he said earnestly. But, honey, pretending to be someone you're not isn't the way to do it. Taking a deep breath, I decided it was time to be fully honest. Over the next hour, I poured out my heart, telling him about my life in Qatar, the job I'd secured, and most importantly, about Robert. He listened intently, his expression unreadable. After I finished, a weighty silence hung in the air. Finally, he studied me for a long moment, then his face broke into a slow smile. It wasn't exactly approval, but it wasn't disapproval either. All right, he chuckled, pride evident in his voice. Looks like you've grown up quite a bit. Just be careful, okay? This world can be tough. I will, I promised, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. The next year was a blur of hard work and stolen moments with Robert. The pressures of the firm were immense, but I excelled. My efforts and intelligence finally gained the recognition they deserved. A year later, I was promoted to associate partner, a significant achievement in the cutthroat world of investment banking. One evening, while cooking dinner in my tiny apartment, Robert still hadn't convinced me to move in. He suddenly dropped to one knee, a sparkling diamond ring catching the candlelight. "Emma," he began, his voice laden with emotion, "you're the smartest, most beautiful woman I know. Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in my eyes as I choked out a joyful yes and threw my arms around him. At that moment, I knew I was the happiest woman alive. Wedding planning began immediately. We opted for a simple ceremony on a secluded beach in the Maldives, envisioning a day that was just about us, Robert and me, celebrating our love without any ostentation. As the ocean breeze gently swept across the shoreline, I contemplated the simplicity of our upcoming wedding. Despite my background, a lavish ceremony was the last thing I wanted. It was essential to keep my past under wraps. Still, there was someone I needed to update. "Hey, Dad," I began, my voice a cocktail of excitement and apprehension. On the other end, his familiar chuckle eased some of my nerves. "It's time for some news?" "Go ahead, kiddo," he encouraged. "Robert and we're getting married," I announced. A pause hung in the air before he responded with a seriousness that was uncharacteristic. "Honey, I'm happy for you, but coming to the wedding might not be the best idea. It could stir up more attention than you'd want." My heart dropped as I understood the weight of his words. His high-profile presence could easily unravel the discreet life I had built. "Okay," I conceded softly, forcing a smile into my voice. He cleared his throat, adding, "And Mira, make sure you guys are thinking ahead. A prenup wouldn't hurt." His practical advice didn't surprise me. It made sense, given our distinct backgrounds. "Sure, Dad," I replied, embracing his suggestion wholeheartedly. Meeting Robert's family introduced a different set of challenges. His mother, draped in elegance and exuding wealth, gave me a lukewarm smile that barely masked her scrutiny. "Robert hasn't told us much about your work," she probed, her sweetness tinged with insincerity. Robert, ever so naive to the undercurrents, beamed with pride. "She's an associate partner at a prestigious investment firm, Mom. She's incredibly talented." Her smile tightened. "An investment firm? How interesting." The evening rolled on with subtle jabs and pointed inquiries about our financial arrangements. Calm and collected, I addressed each one. "We've already discussed a prenup," I informed her, my tone both cool and assured. Her reaction was a mix of startled respect and reluctant admiration. The wedding day itself was exactly as I had hoped, simple and beautiful. Just me, Robert, and the rhythmic sound of waves crashing against the shore as we sealed our promises to each other. A few weeks later, back in New York, Robert surprised me with the keys to a beautiful house in a tranquil, upscale neighborhood. It wasn't a mansion, but it was perfect for us. As we stood in the foyer surrounded by unpacked boxes, I felt a wave of contentment. Life was not exactly as I had planned, but it was genuinely fulfilling. However, as time passed, the glow of my professional successes seemed to cast a shadow over Robert's spirits. His congratulations, once warm and enthusiastic, now felt perfunctory. The joy in his eyes seemed to dim with each of my achievements. Then came the merger, an enormous success for the firm and a personal triumph for me. I rushed to share the news with Robert, only to find him subdued. His reaction was a complex mix of astonishment and restraint. "You did good, babe," he said, the strain evident in his voice. It felt like praise forced out rather than freely given. A chill of realization crept over me. Could my successes be diminishing him somehow? At home, his mother was no help. Her expertise in passive aggression shone through. Back in my day, she would often start, her voice dripping with condescension. Wives focused on their homes, not playing at business. Navigating this new dynamic was challenging. I had to tread carefully, balancing my professional aspirations with the personal pressures at home, all the while questioning how to maintain my happiness without overshadowing those I loved. The day Robert barged into our house, his face stormy and his mood darker than I had ever seen, my heart sank. Without a word, he threw a thick envelope onto the kitchen table. "Severance package," he growled, his voice cold. "The staff, cleaners, cooks, gardeners, they're all gone. Looks like you'll finally have to make this house a home." Anger surged within me, but it was swiftly washed away by a wave of fear. I didn't want a divorce. I wanted the man I had married, the loving Robert, to return. In a desperate attempt to mend our fraying relationship, I decided to embrace the role of homemaker, believing that if I could create the perfect domestic sanctuary, perhaps Robert would see my value again. A part of me longed to call my father, to seek his advice and possibly his help, but pride held me back. I couldn't bear to let him see the mess I was in. This was my battle to handle. Months later, to smooth over the growing rift, Robert planned a cruise on his luxurious yacht. The sun glared off the polished deck as we sailed. His mother, Rose, in a garish white pantsuit adorned with excessive diamonds, held court among her affluent friends. They cackled over champagne, their laughter grating against the rhythmic slap of the waves. Robert, ever the attentive son, hovered around, refilling glasses and forcing laughter at his mother's stale jokes. I managed a strained smile, trying to ignore the knot of discomfort in my stomach. As the day progressed, champagne loosened Rose's tongue, transforming her polite mask into a spiteful sneer. Swinging toward me with a glass in hand, she slurred, "It takes a special kind of woman to give up a promising career to scrub toilets." Her companions erupted in harsh laughter, their glee cutting through me like a blade. I remained silent, not wanting to escalate the tension. Robert, oblivious or indifferent, laughed along, praising my newfound domestic skills. "That's right, Ma. Myra's a real domestic goddess now." The evening spiraled with each passing hour. Each jab from Rose was met with nothing but feeble jokes from Robert. I felt reduced to a mere trophy wife, my silence misread as submission. As darkness fell and the yacht neared a cluster of small islands, I'd had enough. I approached the captain, a seasoned sailor named Jackson, and said firmly, "I need to get off this boat." He looked at me with concern. "Here? In the middle of nowhere?" "Yes," I affirmed, my resolve hardening. "There's an island nearby. Please drop me off and notify the Coast Guard." A few minutes later, the yacht slowed near my chosen island. As I moved toward the railing, clutch in hand, Robert finally took notice. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded, irritation sharp in his voice. "Somewhere you don't want me to be," I retorted, my decision clear. "Consider this marriage over. Both you and your precious mother are unworthy of any more of my time." Rose, spurred on by alcohol and my defiance, cackled. "You think you can just walk away? You've been living off his money." Robert's face twisted in anger as he lunged for my purse, ripping it from my hands. "These are my credit cards, Myra. Leave if you must, but leave everything." As I stepped onto the small boat that would take me to shore, leaving behind the toxic atmosphere and the stifling confines of a loveless marriage, I felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. I was finally taking a stand, not just for my dignity, but for my happiness. By the break of dawn, I expected to see her stranded on that island, pitiful and desperate. But as I observed the two of them, devoid of compassion and warmth, an unusual calm enveloped me. Perhaps, I replied, locking eyes with Robert. But at least I'll retain my dignity. Robert's yacht floated nonchalantly at anchor, echoes of raucous laughter drifting from it. I stood on the dock, the chilly night breeze providing relief from the yacht's oppressive revelry. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows, his uniform sharply contrasting with the yacht's festive environment. He marched determinedly toward the vessel, his voice resonating over the water. "Ahoy! This island is private, and access is restricted. Understand?" His tone carried the weight of authority. Robert, still flushed from his previous outburst, leaned over the railing, baffled. "What? Who are you?" The man, a security guard named Hannah, whom I had discreetly informed earlier, an act of quiet rebellion that felt incredibly satisfying, stood firm. "Security," he stated simply. "Looks like you're lost. You need to leave within 3 hours." Robert scoffed. 3 hours? We just arrived. And why should we listen to you? Hannah, unimpressed, replied in a lower tone. "You don't want to cross the owner of this island. He's a man of significant influence. It's in your best interest not to antagonize him." As Rose began to realize what was happening, she leaned in, her voice overly sweet. "Oh, but surely a little longer won't hurt?" Hannah then turned to me, his expression softening upon recognition. He saluted crisply. "Miss Lambert," he announced, his voice carrying across the waters, "your private plane is prepared and awaiting your departure. Shall we proceed to the airstrips?" The air was electric with tension. Robert's complexion turned pale, and Rose's mouth fell open in shock. This was the moment of truth. I smiled broadly, walking toward Hannah and embracing him warmly. "Thank you, Hannah. You and your team have done an exemplary job," he responded, slightly embarrassed by my show of gratitude. "Just doing my job, Miss Lambert." Robert, regaining his voice, stammered. "Wait, Lambert." Ignoring him, I followed Hannah, my spirits uplifted. The world seemed more vibrant, the air fresher. "Already," Hannah mentioned casually. "Ready to take you wherever you need to go, Miss Lambert." Behind us, Rose gasped in disbelief. "You're the daughter of—" She didn't need to finish. The truth was apparent. Robert, finally understanding, stumbled after me. "Emma, wait. Please come back." His voice was tinged with a desperation I never thought possible just hours before. But I continued forward, empowered by newfound strength, their apologies and pleas fading into the background. The sound of the approaching plane was a symphony of liberation, transporting me toward a future defined on my terms. The next morning, with the taste of freedom still lingering, I walked into the office of a notorious divorce attorney, a relentless shark handpicked for this very purpose. He rifled through some documents, ready to dive into the fray. A smirk spread across his face.
"Hold on a second," he said.
"It seems during your tenure at Robert's esteemed company, you orchestrated several multi-million-dollar deals. Oddly enough, there's no mention of a bonus in your contract. Is there?" A slow burn ignited in my chest. They hadn't just underestimated me. They had tried to cheat me. The lawyer, sensing my mounting fury, gave my hand a reassuring pat.
"Don't worry, my dear.
We'll secure everything you're owed. The divorce settlement, backdated bonuses, the whole lot." He kept his promise. The divorce proceedings were quick and ruthless. Robert, deflated and subdued, sat opposite me, his swagger replaced by a sullen demeanor. The judge, a stern woman unfazed by intimidation, granted me a substantial settlement, including the backdated bonuses that my ex had conveniently neglected. As I exited the courtroom, a triumphant smile adorned my face. As I passed Robert, I noticed his red-rimmed eyes and slouched posture. "Emma," he murmured, his voice a mere whisper. "Everyone's laughing at me, my friends. I miss you." He reached out, but I recoiled. His pathetic attempt only fortified my determination. "Miss me? You never truly saw me, Robert. You were too engrossed with your mother's advice to notice the woman right in front of you. He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't let him. Here's some free advice. Next time, maybe listen more to the strong, capable woman you marry if there is a next time. The following day, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Rose's name. A scoff escaped me as she cooed with feigned affection. Emma, darling, Robert is devastated. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive him and start over? Her audacity was astounding. I laughed heartily, the sound rising genuinely from deep within. Forgive him? Start over? Rose, the only thing starting over is my life, and it certainly won't include either of you. Before she could spew more manipulations, I ended the conversation with a sharp, "This call is over. And by the way, your number is now blocked." With a decisive click, I hung up. The air was charged with promise as I stood at the entrance of my new foundation's office. The walls were adorned with the aspirations of budding entrepreneurs, their innovative ideas poised for support and launch. This was my new arena, and this time, I was championing the good guys. Empowered by the generous settlement to make a real difference, with wise investments in my portfolio, money was the least of my worries. More importantly, the recent court case had ignited a deep well of determination within me. I was not just going to rebuild my life, I was set on helping others craft their own. The Emma Evans Foundation became my tool for fighting mediocrity, a launching pad for those brimming with talent and ambition. The foundation's inaugural day was a bustling scene of activity. Hopeful individuals streamed into the office, each carrying unique vision and a fierce determination to leave their mark on the world. Mentors moved through the crowd, offering advice and encouragement, filling the room with an electric buzz of shared purpose. Just as the day began to wind down, the office door swung open, and in walked a familiar figure that made my jaw drop. It was my father. His laughter filled the room as he saw my astonished face. "Surprised your old man can find his way around without a map?" he joked. A wave of warmth washed over me. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I exclaimed as he pulled me into a comforting hug, his familiar scent grounding me. "I thought I'd come and see how the big boss lady is running things," he winked, adding humorously, "Besides, your fancy foundation doesn't need another broke dreamer on its payroll, does it?" I laughed, the tension easing from my shoulders. "Dad, it's not about the money, it's about giving people a chance." He nodded, his gaze turning serious. "And you, sweetheart, are giving yourself a hell of a chance." A blush crept over my cheeks as I thought about my past with Robert. "I should have listened to you, Dad." He squeezed my hand, reassuringly. "Listen, sometimes you have to learn things the hard way. That's life. But what matters is you learned, and you came out on the other side stronger and wiser." He glanced around the office, his eyes twinkling with pride. "This is something special, Emma Evans. Something you built yourself. And no matter what life throws your way, remember, you've always got a home here with me." As he turned to leave, I grabbed his arm. "Thanks, Dad," I whispered, the words thick with gratitude for his unwavering support. He smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes. "Anytime, kiddo." With a final wave, he walked out the door, leaving behind a renewed sense of purpose in me. The future might be uncertain, but armed with the lessons I've learned and the love of my family, I knew I was ready to face whatever came next.